Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, the artist behind Bigelow Fine Arts. How is your coloring going? Did you finish up the Panzerpermia page from Worlds Within Worlds? Let me know below how it is going. Today I'm starting the Crest in Enchanted Forest, going with a simple palette here. My pencils are ready. Come along and join me and let's color this in together. I'm starting with the pine green and some of the thin curling vines. I'm going dark on the vines. I want a good layer, but I'm not pressing hard yet. I want to block in my colors before coming back in for an extra layer later. For the leafy vine, I'm putting in a small dark circle of pine green at the base of each of the small leaves. I keep following the vines around, blocking them in with the pine green. The large leaf attached to the vine, I decided to make it dark green as well, but I left the center of the leaf alone, as I'm thinking of putting in the lighter green in the center to give the leaf character. I put a light layer of pine green on the pine trees, but I'm not sure how I want them to look right now. I am thinking this is a crest, which normally means everything is stylized and more flat in color. I continue following the vine down and then around the outside of the large leaf. I add some to the center of the stylized leaves near the sword. From there, I need to make the other half of the page look the same. And since I now know what things are starting to look like, I can go through a little faster and even add in more layers. Thinking about how crests look, this actually could be an easy page to color up for a beginner because everything can just be a solid color. I'm going for mostly solid colors, but I'm giving a few elements a slight bit of dimension, such as adding in the dark green to the base of the leaves. I'm now going to come in with the permanent olive green and begin filling in the sections where I wanted the green to be lighter. I'm beginning with the vines of leaves, adding in another layer over the pine green to darken it up more, and putting in a lighter layer over the rest of the leaf. I'm not pressing super hard here, but I am giving it a bit of pressure. In the end, the more pressure used, the fewer layers needed. I typically go with a lighter pressure to save my wrists from the stress of pressing hard, especially if I'm going to be sitting and coloring for a little longer than 10 minutes. Most of my coloring sessions tend to go longer, so I want to save my wrists so I can go for a longer time. I'm also going to fill in any leaves I didn't fill in earlier. This includes most of the leaves on the other vines. I will also give them a gradient effect, going with more layers or a heavier hand near the base of the leaf and fewer layers or lighter pressure near the tips. With the pine trees, I'm working up a lighter layer near the top and a darker layer near the bottom of the boughs. The trees each have 3 levels or layers, and I'm working each layer the same, lighter to the top and darker to the bottom. This is not a stark effect, but is pretty subtle, likely more visible in person than in video. I keep working my way down the vine, working up each little leaf as I come to them, darker near the base and lighter near the tip. The big leaf near the bottom gets filled in with a layer of the olive green, as I am not sure what I can do to break up the expanse of green. I kept it a little light just in case I wanted to do something different later. Time will tell on that one. The 2 smaller leaves of a similar type, I filled in the stem with a good layer, but for the leaves themselves, I worked up a gradient effect, again working in a darker layer near the center rib and a lighter layer near the edges of the leaf. I pictured the leaf folded in half, the top leaf facing up and the bottom leaf facing down. I filled in the stylized leaves at the bottom, just going with a solid coverage for the moment and deciding later if I should do anything more or simply fill it in. At this point, it is time to go ahead and fill in the other half of the crest, working everything up as similarly as I can. Since I now know how things are looking, I can go through and hit everything more quickly because I don't have to decide what I am doing. I've also found most of the little leaves, and it's easier to track them down now. I go through and work up the pine trees and all the little leaves the same as I did for the first half, right down to the stylized leaves on the bottom near the sword. Next up, I'm coming in with the gray too, and I'm going to be working on the birds and the dragons. I might regret making the dragons gray later, but for now I wanted something simple and stylized, which is what a crest normally is. I'm going to add in a layer over the entire bird body except for the beak and legs. For the dragon, it will get the same treatment over the entire body except for the teeth, tail, and scales, the back. I also hit the tips of the arrows with the gray too, and the blade of the sword as well. Everything is just getting a simple flat layer with this color. With the gray 4, I'm going to start adding in some character to the birds and dragons. This will help define them better and help them pop up off the page a little more. But given that this is a crest, I'm not going to try to make them look super realistic. I just want them to look slightly less flat. For the feathers on the wings, I'm going to add in a darker layer on the part of the feather that is closest to the top of the wing, and nothing at the bottom of the feather tip to give it a highlighted effect. Where the top would be in shadow, the bottom is exposed. I do this for all feathers on the wings, even the long flight feathers and the tail feathers. For the long flight feathers and the tail, I'm mostly keeping the gray 4 up near the bottom of the feather and not going near the tips at all. I shade the raised leg as it is coming from behind. I shade the neck and the bottom of the top ruffle of feathers, and finally I shade the area around the stomach. For the arrows, I am shading one side of them, and since I forgot to hit them with the gray 2, I am adding in that layer now. I can now go through and work up the second bird exactly the same way. I am also making the assumption here that this is a relatively flat crest and there is no light source, so I am not going to be concerned with where shadows would be for this piece, as in around the edges. I'm just sticking with stylized flat. Moving on to the dragons, I'm going in with the same gray 4 and adding in dark areas for detail. I began with the inside of the ear, making that dark. Then I hit the area around the mouth, making it darker since it almost looks like a mustache. The bone lines in the wings as well. I guess I could have made the webbing dark, but opted for the ridges instead. The back legs, the top one holding the shield, and the bottom one, I make a little darker, just enough to show it is further back. I also add a light layer over the torso of the dragon to help it stand out from the lightness of the paper, but I will likely be adding in a background, so this might not be necessary. I just decided to darken up the gray a little. I worked up the second dragon the same way. I look over at the first to make sure I am hitting the same areas and getting them about the same color. I don't want them to look lopsided or have one stand out more than the other. Finally, I use the dark gray on one side of the sword to give it shape, just a little, and I fill in the handguard as well. I am assuming it is made of the same metal as the blade. I'm going to work on a few of the smaller details, but since I am moving around a lot more, I can't zoom in as much. I am working up the small acorns hanging from the vine with the burnt sienna. I work the little stem up first, then I add a light layer over the entire acorn. For the cap, I add another layer at the bottom of the cap to help it stand out more from the body of the acorn, which I kept later. I work all 4 acorns up in much the same way. Doing them all at the same time also ensures I am getting them about the same. I use the same burnt sienna to fill in the stems on the mushrooms, just a light layer as this isn't really a brown, but more of a brown-red. I come in with the grey too and add a layer over the mushroom stems to fill in the paper more and tone down the burnt sienna. This does give it more of a light brown appearance. And really, this is a tiny space. Who's going to notice the color of my mushroom stems? I use the same grey on the bottom part of the acorns as well, and for pretty much the same reason. And now I'm going to go looking for anything else that might be brownish. I do the hilt of the sword with the burnt sienna, going for a leather-wrapped appearance. I bring in the grey too to add another layer to keep the burnt sienna light. I add more burnt sienna to one side to give it a rounded appearance. Totally unnecessary given I wanted all this to be stylized, but I guess I can't resist a good shadow. Moving along, I am making the shaft of the arrows brown with the burnt sienna. I use the grey 2 on all the fletching feathers, and the grey 4 on just one side. Still looking for more brown, I decided to make the castle door a brownish colour as well as the bridge. I made the sides of the bridge darker than the footpath part. I'm setting myself up here for things to come. This is the crest for the castle, and as such, should show what the castle looks like, even if it is stylized. So in this case, if you want a blue door on your castle later in the book, this is a great time to add it now. I think I want a reddish-brown door, or I could even go for brown or red. I have a little wiggle room later if I want, but this is partly how I am treating this page. I am using the colors here to set up the colors for later in the book, although I might not make the dragons grey. With the Naples yellow, I am going to go around and fill in anything I think I want yellow. This includes the birds' beaks, their legs, the spikes along the dragon's back, their teeth, and I did their tongue too and realized that wasn't really what I wanted. I put the yellow on the stars as well. At this point, realizing my mistake, I used the scarlet on the tongues to make them look more like tongues. I also fill in the pendant flags on the castle. I wasn't sure I wanted them to be red, but I couldn't think of another good color for them to be. I guess a nice green would match the feel of the book, but that is a lot of green. Or maybe a royal blue would work? I don't know, I'll think about it. And of course, I made the mushrooms red, because I like red mushrooms. They had a nice pop of color. I'll be stopping here for today, but with this simple palette, it should take only 2 more coloring sessions to finish, so stay tuned and see how it comes out. I hope you've been following along. Please let me know below. I'd love to know how your coloring is coming along. I'm on MeWe and would love to build a coloring community there with everyone to share art, talk art, and discuss supplies. I have my social media links below. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, MeWe, and Patreon. Patreon has a short write-up as well as a list of all my palettes that I'm using and a list of the timestamps. It's available for everyone. If you have any questions or page requests, please leave them below or reach out to me on social media. I put in a list of chapter breaks in the show notes as well as a list of equipment I like to use. If you use any of my affiliate links, it really helps me out without costing you a thing. I want to thank you all so much for coming along and joining in with me on this coloring journey. I appreciate all my subscribers and look forward to more of you joining in and coloring along with me. Please like, share, and subscribe to help that happen. Until next time, happy coloring!